Hello and welcome to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. The Society for Hospitality and Food Service Management is a community of like-minded professionals seeking educational, developmental, and networking opportunities to enrich their personal and professional goals. Hello and welcome back to Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. I'm your host, Michael Moore, and in today's episode, we are talking about the art of negotiation. What is it? How can it help? And just some basic ways to start to employ it in your everyday world, whether that's personally or professionally. And to be honest, I think this is one of the most interesting topics that we have explored yet, because it's so relevant to everyone's day-to-day life, whether you're interacting with friends, family, employees, clients. And we're lucky enough today to be joined by Mike Gregg, the co-founder and chief customer officer. But I got to know what that is. Chief customer officer of Nutrislice.
Chief customer officer. That just makes sure that that essentially the title means take care of your customers from every stage of marketing, sales, client success, implementation of software. Just take care of your customers.
I love that you made it important enough to have a chief position. I mean, honestly, it just says so much about how important that experience is. So Mike, I just want to say thank you for taking the time with us, today to connect, share some insights. You and I have talked in the past, and you're just a wonderful font of knowledge on this topic. And I think everyone needs to know about it.
Well, thank you. It's quite an honor to be here and to be part of SHFM and the podcast. Congrats to you and the hard work of the team.
Thank you.
To launch this podcast. It's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, 387 billion followers. It's pretty interesting so far how rapidly we've grown. Yeah, I mean, they're all bots, but it's worth it, I think. I think just a fun fact about how we met was actually this last year at Amelia Island for the SHFM Foundation Golf Tournament. We found out quickly that we were both from Colorado. Actually, we were in line together, checking into the hotel exhausted at like midnight or 1 a.m. or something. I saw you 4.5 hours later in my golf foursome for this. And it occurred to me that, yes, we're both in Colorado and that I've done a terrible job networking locally. I've so focused on national stuff that we have so many wonderful companies here in Colorado. And so if anyone didn't have a chance, and I know you were well represented, your company was well represented at our last SHFM local. We're doing another one in August, I believe. So if anyone didn't have a chance, shoot me an email. Let's get involved, or shoot Mike an email and hear more about his topic, what interests him, and get involved in our next one.
That's your experience. I, on the other hand, have known and recognized you for some time from afar, and
so creepy. I love it.
It's quite the man crush. I was just way too nervous to come up to you.
Yes, first man crush. I love it.
It's like high school. It's high school all over again. Standing in line at the hotel, and everyone comes up to you like, "Hey, Michael Moore, you're here," and I'm like, "Who is this guy?" And wake up the next morning, find out you're in my golf group and like sweaty hands and everything. Like, I'm not that good at golf anyways, so had nothing to lose.
I love it. That's awesome. And so before we dive too much into the topic, what we love to do is really explore the people that we have on with us, because you're an interesting person to talk about this and that how it lines up with your personality and everything. But we really need to know, how did you come to be a co-founder of a very, very cool company? Have you always been in food service, and what do you do?
Yeah. So look, it starts way back in the day. My dad was a school lunch director, K-12, for most of his career. And I had often wondered now, like on dad's night to cook dinner, if he didn't just bring home the leftover school lunches and serve them to the kids again. Probably like explains a lot about my childhood.
Fair enough.
But I never imagined a career in food service. I was always wanting to do something innovative with strategy and technology. So, it came time to start a software company, and it was just natural to chat with my father. And he's just like, shout out to my dad. If he's listening, he'll definitely listen, but he's a wonderful, wonderful person. He invited us into the life of a food service operator, the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, he just presented it. Here's what we experience. And, for me, it was equally parts impressive and depressing all at the same time. The impressive nature of food service operators is their commitment, just the time they spend, their dedication, passion to everything, to creating these just incredible food experiences.
That's
at the same time. Yeah, sorry.
No, as I said, that's one thing that it's a great thing to point out how much time and energy is put into the background of food service. You can't really get a scale for it unless you're deeply involved, or if you think about every big meal you've had in your life, your Thanksgivings, your Christmas, stuff like that, if you celebrate, or whatever holidays you celebrate, it's 5, 6, 7 hours goes into one meal that is enjoyed for a very little amount of time, but it's so important just to get it right, how much work goes into it.
Yeah, those experiences are what make life kind of worth living. And it's impressive, everyone that puts time into creating those experiences. So that was super impressive. Kind of the first time as an individual that I had seen that. The flip side to that, it was also depressing. Just no matter how impressive the experiences were being created, you could just see episodes in every career arc where there was just utter frustration and, just like, what am I doing? Why am I in this career?
So what were you doing before, you had this moment of saying, I need to start a software company, or, I need to pivot. What were you doing, and how did your dad really play that big role though?
Yeah. So I was doing marketing. I was working for a boutique consulting agency out of Austin, Texas. And, the old man, he calls me up and he's like, help me with marketing. I need to do better. And so, he wanted free consulting essentially. And so that invitation into his life and career was eye-opening in the sense that operationally super sound, hard worker, very smart, just doing amazing things behind the scenes. But when it came time to tell that story to the front line, to the customers, it just kind of fell flat. And, in school lunch, there's obviously this bias that it's the cause of childhood obesity, all these negative connotations that come along with it. And he just exhausted at the question he would always ask is, no matter what I do, everyone thinks that I'm like some person who's ready to whip out some 12-month-old casserole at the deep end of my freezer, and they never understand the value of what we provide. And so that, like, here's what's reality is happening and here's what everyone is perceiving us to do was just off. And we wanted to bring that more into alignment. So that was essentially the genesis of Nutrislice. And, to some extent, the career I had before starting the software company really prepared me to kind of listen and grow in those areas to see where there were gaps and kind of solve those problems.
And so how do you make that connection? How does Nutrislice bridge that gap between, your dad's hard work and millions of people's hard work and how that work is viewed, how it's connected with?
We're not there yet. It's a journey for sure, decade plus, but essentially, like, it's all about storytelling, and foods inherently have a story to be told. And in non-commercial food service, it's really difficult to do that because you're usually dealing with a customer's press for time. They just have different expectations. Technology trends are advancing where, people want seamless experiences, but they want answers to the questions they have at the snap, the tap of a finger. And, it's just been difficult traditionally and historically for food service to kind of provide that context and that storytelling at the pace of the modern consumer.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. Everybody wants to know the life cycle of food. They want to know where it came from. Was it sustainable? Is it aligning with their food values? All these different things. And yeah, I guess you're really right when you think about it, that the larger corporations on the commercial side have the ability to get that information out there in an engaging way. And it's not something that you think of more in a K-12 facility or higher education even, or other verticals.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were marketing, your dad needed help. You were tapped as a free source of information, and you got inspired along the way. Did you just kind of up and leave and have that moment of saying, I got to quit my job, I got to do this? Or what did that story look like?
Michael Moore, this is like the introduction to negotiation, and this is why I care so much about it. So So I'm working the day job prior to
Hmm.
starting Nutrislice. And, after about 9 months in, I realized that like I was, I had a critical role. I was really contributing. And, I probably just wasn't compensated to what I thought I should have been. And it was, it was time to kind of bring that up. And,
Hmm.
I was naive. I made a ton of mistakes, but essentially I think, I calculated one week, here's all the time that I spent and here's my hourly wage. And that imbalance of like what I was doing for what I was getting paid really kind of struck my mind. I had a hard time like escaping that thought. And so I'm like, I got to do something about this. And so I just like went in, sat down with my boss and, made the ask, right? And
Which is
let me
always uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable process.
Yeah, I mean, for someone who wanted to be in strategy, it was not very strategic, but I'll tell you, it didn't go well. It was one of those like classical boomer versus millennial conversations where, it just, it just fell flat. And,
Been there.
I just remember kind of leaving the office that day thinking in my mind, like, okay, if they're not going to give me a raise, then I'm going to have to give myself my own raise and work fewer hours. And like, okay, justified, like this is how I'm going to do it. And, freeing up time at night kind of introduced the idea of starting the software company. And that is both the frustration and the beauty of where I'm at today with Nutrislice.
Okay. I mean, you're doing something that, we've talked about this on previous episodes. It's terrifying and it's a huge risk. And yet at the same time, it's yours and it's your idea. And you have the joy, I think, of seeing something come to life that is a reflection of you and your goals and your priorities and your energy and all that kind of stuff. So it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that does lead us naturally into our topic for the day, which, to be honest, when you first brought this up as something, I was so excited because negotiation is one of those words that it sounds hard. It sounds like you're on a TV show and working for the FBI and trying to talk somebody out of a
Yeah,
bank
like
robbery.
when you hear the word negotiation, Michael Moore, like what immediately comes to your mind? Is there a scenario, a phrase? Like what do you think of
Uh,
negotiation?
high risk, high reward, all or nothing kind of, somebody that is just I can't say the word, but like a very intimidating individual in their field that is making something happen or losing it all in one fell swoop. And
High risk. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
yeah, exactly. It's like a hard word, negotiation.
I always have like this idea of walking in. Negotiation is some used car salesman like approaching me. And
Mm-hmm.
I totally know going in, like he is gonna try and swindle me. This car salesman is gonna try and swindle me. It's gonna be great for him and terrible for me. And so I put up all these barriers. I'm like, okay, let's negotiate.
Yeah, yeah,
And
no, it's true, and that I think it almost goes hand in hand in a lot of ways with the word sales,
mhm.
where people see the word, they're like, oh, they're trying to negotiate to get me to buy something I don't want, and that if you're effective at all in sales, it has nothing to do with any of that. But I mean, I think it leads us naturally to the question of what are we talking about? Like, what does negotiation
Yeah.
mean in our industry?
Yeah. I mean, I think the better way to think about it is negotiation is just really, really good collaboration.
I
And
love that. Yeah.
bad negotiation is bad collaboration. And when I change, at least for my own mindset, when I change, like instead of a negotiation, it's more of a collaboration.
Hmm.
That just works for me. And maybe that's just my personality type. But to me, I think, okay, it's time to get creative and collaborate with another individual, whether that's a boss, an employee, a client, a prospect, whoever that is. Like it's time to get creative and collaborate together.
Yeah. I like that you pivot from adversarial being the thought that comes to mind with negotiation. It's an adversarial process of two people that are unaligned trying to make something happen versus collaborating, meaning we both want the same thing. We want a happy outcome. We want a long-term partnership. We want to satisfy what are the needs instead of forcing something.
So, story time. In the early days of Nutrislice, like we've got this software product. We're just kind of, floundering along a little bit, trying to find our footing. And we finally find an individual, a prospect who's like, hey, I'm interested in your software. How much does it cost? And we weren't prepared. So we're like, well, let's set up a time and we'll walk through the price. And we decided to have this internal meeting, and we're like, hey, let's negotiate with them. And like, if you were there like a fly on the wall, you'd have been like, you guys were preparing for war. Like, finance pulls out all their numbers, like, look at this ammo, and if they say this, if they do this tactical move, this is how we retaliate. And then, it's like all this strategy. And you would have been like, what are you guys doing? And we were, we thought we were negotiating, but really we were just punk kids, walking down the wrong path of how to negotiate and how to collaborate with other parties.
Well, I mean, when I think of Nutrislice, I immediately go punk kids. And so I guess it does lead itself to the next natural question, which is, what are some of the pillars or silos of negotiation that are most important to SHFM membership? When you think about our members, you've got operators, you've got decision makers, you have vendors and client liaisons, and all these, like a wonderful spread of points of view in our industry. But what's most important to consider here?
Yeah, I think for the listenership, that's the word. It's the first one. The first pillar is employees to their employer. It might be to a manager, the company they work for, but first and foremost, as an employee, I negotiate with the company I work for. I'm coming to bring my best and bring my all. And just in the course of a day, there's lots of negotiations that happen and times to collaborate with the company that I'm representing.
Okay.
That's the first pillar.
That's the first pillar. What else do we have? What else do we
run through them all?
Let's run through them all, and then we'll circle back. Yeah.
If you've evolved and maybe you manage a team, you have a pillar where you negotiate with your team, those that you're leading and managing. And boy, everyone gets really excited about the opportunity once they are the employer or the manager. Hey, I've got a team, I get to negotiate with them, and it's more than just a hiring process. It's the day-to-day, it's the priorities, it's the adjustments that we're making as a group, and you're navigating that team. And, many of the negotiations that happen in these first two pillars, I don't think we realize how often they happen and how poorly or how well we're doing in those areas. But, employer looking up to the company that you're representing, and then when you're managing a team is kind of a top-down approach. But those are two separate pillars that I think everyone needs to understand and work with.
And what about the other one we talked about, which is kind of that relationship between providers and clients, or operators and clients?
Client negotiation, operator to client management. That's the fun one. And, many in this space definitely are, we've got customers that we got to take care of. We got clients that we meet with on the regular, and we need to do a knockdown stellar job. And that's just another variable into this recipe where I'm also negotiating with my team and my company. And now I've got a client that's coming in and they've got needs, and it's just a balancing act. And you're just, being a skilled negotiator in this space, especially for members of SHFM, is probably one of the most critical talents that you need to be able to thrive, I mean, I agree. Like, if you look at negotiation as a part of your everyday life, no matter what position you're in, it's not a sales specific thing by any means. It's like you said, every aspect of your job is going to have an opportunity to collaborate on an end result that's different from where you started. Meaning, I may have one idea, you have a different one. We still want the same thing in the end. It's how do we collaborate and meet on that? And maybe just to start it off, we've got our three silos, but let's talk about collaboration between clients and operators. So client relationship management. Let's just talk more about it. It can be so hard. I mean, how do you do it?
So my goal in everything that I do with my clients is to promote the long-term partnership and to add value to whatever they're doing. So if they have a problem, I'm here to solve it. I'm not here to sell. I'm not here to provide products, as I'm here to provide value in their day. I want to make their life easier. I want to make it more manageable, and I want them to build their business because we're able to help them get there. So that's how I see it. I never see anyone coming in and saying, I need this or I don't want this. It's just not not how I view it. I view it as, how do we promote a long-term partnership so in the end your company grows and we can grow with you?
Hey, that's a fantastic answer. But what do you do now when you've got the client and they're just super hard to work with? They come to you or they have some crazy demands.
Well, I mean, first off, you look at it, they wouldn't come to me if they didn't know we had something to provide. So the understanding there is, yeah, they have a lot of things in their world that are probably making them stressed for time, stressed in a million different ways. And to take a step back and understand that most of that has nothing to do with you or what you're providing, I think eliminates 80% of that. They're not trying to be short. They're not trying to do any of those things. They are in a stress position and they need help out of it. So I think you find the common ground immediately that way of saying, how can I help? What can I do to make your life better?
One of the things that you're probably naturally really, really good at, and to me, the foundation of all good negotiation or collaboration is just bringing to the table a strong sense of empathy.
Yes,
the most empathetic people to me are like the ones that win the most with negotiation.
I guess I never thought about that, but that's such a solid point. People want to felt understood, and they want to know that their problem is important to you as well, because it is. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think the idea of a partnership, which all good relationships should be built on, the idea of a long-term partnership, is the understanding that your problems are my problems, meaning I'm here to help you. So I think in terms of someone coming in a little confrontational, understanding that they're not necessarily upset with you. They're upset because there's an issue and they came to you, whether that was happily or in a stressed position, because you could help them. And so, yeah.
You're a very empathetic individual, Michael Moore. Just listening to you talk now, I can sense that you're there. But, just because you bring empathy to this situation doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a collaborative environment. How in the world do you get these crazy demands that probably come in? You probably receive a few emails. What's the craziest demand you've ever gotten from a customer?
I mean, you get a lot of things that are, you're unable to meet them right where they want to start, simply because it isn't physically impossible, as we know reality to be, where someone's in a position where an order was missed on their end or some side, or a last minute catering request came in and they are 1,000 miles away and they need that product in 3 hours. Those types of places, those types of things come in, and I don't want to use the word crazy. I'll never apply that to any of the requests I get, but unfulfillable in that capacity. So, I mean, I would say that, yeah,
it happens all the time. I mean, in the client relation kind of management, I think it's great. Like, empathy can sit with you, but in so many scenarios, what you need is empathy to sit with the other person as well. And they're coming to you, and a lot of times, if you're the one who's providing the service, you kind of feel backed into the corner, and the client, because they kind of have the upper hand in the negotiation, and you want to keep them happy, all that. It could be so stressful, so hard. Like, how do you get empathy? How do you force empathy into another person? And that's a question that, like, I've
You tell me.
You
tell me, Mr. Negotiator. What do you do? I mean, I think we need to know. This is a great way to avoid confrontation and instead turn that into opportunity. So, how does that happen?
And there's probably like so many people smarter than I, but the one thing I have learned, and the one thing I try to do is look for ways to invite empathy from the perspective of the other person. I need them to empathize with my space, where I'm at. And the question that I kind of use all the time is, okay, this makes sense. You need this by this date, right? And you just confirm that you got it right. And they'll nod vigorously, like, okay, I'm in violent agreement that you understand where I'm coming from. You're very empathetic to my plight.
I love that.
And then you got to hit them with the killer question. And the killer question is, how am I supposed to do that?
I love that. Yeah. How? I want to. How?
Yeah, it's like the lifesaver question, and it's pretty tactical, but to me, it like forces the other person to kind of jump out of their skin and to try and reason to how am I going to solve this problem if I was in your shoes? And that essentially like forces empathy. Okay, well, I'm coming to you with these demands and I'm just focused on everything that I need. And you say, how am I supposed to do this? And they're like, well, okay, like, what about this? And, we're in the software space. So a lot of times in food service, people want to understand software, but a lot of times they just kind of miss, they whiff on what it takes to do software, to build something, to release something, to implement something. So we have this account we have this client, they come to us and they're like, we need this account to launch in 2 weeks. And our launch time like typically is like 5 weeks. And we're like, okay, like help us understand, like we're empathetic. Why do you need this account to launch? And they give us all the answers. And it's like, okay, we get it. You are, you've got integrity. You've made this commitment to your client. You want to deliver for them. You've got an awesome operation. You want to show up and show out. Okay, we get it. Makes sense. And they're like, okay, you get me. And I'm like, well, how are we supposed to do this? And they're like, what do you mean? Can't you just launch it in 2 weeks? Just assign someone to work on it. We're like, okay, well, we've got a group of people. It typically takes us 5 weeks to launch. How are we supposed to do it in 2 weeks? What do you mean? Explain more. Okay, well, like right now our team's backed up. They're working with other implementations. How are we supposed to do this? And I'm like, well, could we just pay you more? And there wasn't the solution that we netted on. But as soon as we got this client of ours to like empathize with our situation and start to solve the problem as if they were in our shoes, like, I just knew, okay, creatively and collaboratively, we're on the same page. We're going to solve this problem. And that result is, it totally worked out. It takes creativity. You have to come at it with an open mind, but sometimes you just need to force empathy into your situation with the client. And being empathetic to them only gets you so far.
I like that. And how have you seen a change in your success rates after you transitioned from the, what was the word? Adversarial kind of approach to negotiation. I mean, we're coming in, with our financials blazing and all hardcore stuff, and then you moved into, this different approach of collaboration. How have you seen things change?
Oh, well, I mean, the creativity, when they come to us, they understand more our side of the equation in the business, and that helps when they bring. When they bring that empathy to the table, that helps us infinitely. And, the mutual understanding, we get to understand each other's business. There's just a deeper layer of that relationship. We understand why they want to do things, and there's greater trust. They know that they can call us up and we're going to tell them what we think and how we can deliver. And, we can share our concerns. There's never, I would say this, like in the sales, when you did those kind of negotiations, tit for tat, it ends up, you get some deal, whatever. One side thinks they won, the other side thinks they lose. Once you hand that over to client success, client services, like it still kind of, it flows. And there's just, that relationship doesn't, enable enough trust to go through those times that you're inevitably going to, have to go through with your clients. And you get 2 or 3 bad experiences with a client and you just start to have this opinion of them. Like they're crazy. They don't understand, how business operates, and they don't understand software. And they're thinking like, they don't understand that we have to deliver for our customer. And, why are they being so slow? And, you put yourself inside a cycle that's not productive and not conducive to the relationships and the partnerships that you mentioned at the forefront of, hey, we want to develop a long, tenured partnership where we work together, we take care of each other.
Yeah. And I think that leads to, when you say, forcing empathy into it and helping them to understand your position and where you're coming from and what is and isn't possible. I think it's worth addressing in that, the difference between compromise and collaboration, where compromise has that, what is that old saying? It's something like compromise is when, both parties walk away unhappy or slightly unsatisfied with the outcome. And I don't think that's what it is. It's you get to the place that you both wanted to be in the end. You simply take a slightly different path to get there, where, new ideas are fostered. And in the long term, I think a lot of these opportunities where a client can come in, or or a prospective client can come in with what on the surface might seem unreasonable. And in the end, when you collaborate effectively and you negotiate effectively and get to the core of what they really want, because that rarely comes up in the first question or the first request. Usually what they want is not, I don't know how to say this, not really what they want. In the beginning, you have to go through a series of hows and whys and what are you really looking for to get to that end result. But I think when you do get there in this collaborative fashion, you've built a partnership that's going to last a very long time.
Yeah, I forget the company, but a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to someone in the SHFM space, and they actually had introduced this idea of a health score, where they actively rate and they're just evaluating the relationships that they have with their clients. And I thought that was brilliant, just like being able to keep a track on like how deep is our relationship, where's it at right now, and how do we make it better. And as part of that, there might be a score where it's probably just something that each individual client services manager kind of puts together. But what is the level of empathy that we're feeling for each other at the time? And you can manage the relationships accordingly. Like maybe we need to get more curious and ask more questions and try to understand their perspective and their business a little better, so we can figure out ways to help them.
I agree. And I think we could unfortunately talk about this all day long, but I do want to make sure that we cover some other aspects of negotiation. Can we talk about employee negotiation? It's probably one of the most interesting topics or things, to anyone in SHFM that is looking to advance in their career, that is looking to perhaps move in another direction, a new opportunity, something like that. I mean, let's talk about the employee side of negotiation.
Yeah. What side do you want to talk about?
Why don't we start first with, say, an employee looking for a raise or an employee looking for a new opportunity.
Yeah. How have you done it?
Successfully and wildly unsuccessfully, if I'm being honest. I think in the past, I remember one of my first positions, I won't name the company, but it was an Asian fusion restaurant in downtown LA. At the time, I don't know that it's still there anymore, but I remember when I first started, I was making $10 an hour, and which was not a lot of money. But I remember after my first opportunity for a raise came in my mind, for some reason, I was like, but they'll probably raise me to 15. and they were like, well, what do you think you've earned? I was like, clearly $15 an hour. And it was just a number that I made up, no approach to it, no legwork into it. And I walked away with 50 cents and you're welcome. Which is an example of an unsuccessful way to negotiate a raise, I could say.
Yeah.
And I think since then, little by little, I have learned that going into things well prepared is probably the best tool you're ever going to have in any kind of personal development negotiation or career negotiation, meaning the understanding of what you've done, what value you're adding, and depending employer to employer, very specific examples of, in my world, revenue generation, opportunity creation, execution, all these types of things. I found a much larger success rate.
It sounds like you've had the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Probably most of them have been the ugly, but we're slowly gravitating towards the good. I hope. What about you? I mean,
I told a story. One of the genesis ideas of starting Nutrislice was this poor negotiating experience where it left such a sour taste in my mouth. I'm like, I gotta change this. And, honestly, I'm probably not as strong on this side because when we started Nutrislice, we didn't really have bosses. So from, for the past decade, I've always been on the other side of the table. So I try to kind of walk through, like, hopefully an empathetic way, like what goes on in those negotiating rooms that, is happening. And what I have experienced for myself when others have come, with those questions is that, empathy does need to still be there. And empathy just doesn't come out of, just because you want to be empathetic. You really have to ask questions to get there. And there's so many dynamics to the equation and competing variables outside of, do you, Michael Moore, deserve this promotion? And it could be company policies, HR, finance. There could be so many things that you're just not fully aware of when you go in to have that conversation that you probably should tease out. And I think that will just help in the conversation and in the dialogue. Is your manager, are they permitted to make a promotion or give a raise? What is the process that they have to go through? And, what's the relationship that they have with their teams and their managers? And is that strong? How much work is that going to take if they're all for it? Like, is this, a huge ask of things they're going to have to go through? Or, what obstacles or hidden variables and blockers am I not seeing? Probably the best tactical way to do that in just an unassuming way is this thing you and I have talked about. We call it labeling. Mm-hmm. And, labeling is when you ask questions like it appears, it sounds like, it feels like, it's very non-committal. But what I think it does demonstrate, like theoretically, is that I'm trying to understand this. I don't fully grasp it, and I know you do. So can you just enlighten me more on this topic?
That's a great way of, when I first learned about it, it wasn't quite framed in that way. And I really like that. It's I have an idea. I think I'm moving in the right direction, but you're the expert on this. Can you clarify?
And nothing emboldens a manager more than like, I think you can teach me.
It's true.
Like, well, let me teach you.
It's true.
So in that conversation, like I would, it might be a process, a few conversations you need to kind of have to plant the seed and really understand the situation before you can go make that case for the promotion or the raise, whatever it is. And it might just be like, it feels like it's, I'm looking around at the company. It feels like getting promotions is something that happens inside this organization. Oh, yeah.
And I think a wonderful point that's being raised is, and maybe I'm speaking from my own experiences, that you can assume as an employee going to your boss that there's a benefit to almost blindsiding them with the conversation of, I'm here, this is, a weird mood, but I want to talk about a raise, where you walk in and they're like, what did you want to speak about? And you say, oh, I need a raise. And I don't think there's a benefit to that. I think there's so much more benefit in taking the time to do your research, show them that you are actively trying to understand how the company operates, where its priorities are, what its limitations are. The politics, because every company, if you have 3 employees or you have 3,000, there's politics in play in terms of what is and isn't possible. And I think it's probably an important message to reiterate, in that there is no downside to showing that, yes, at some point you're going to ask for a raise, but you're doing your homework in order to make sure you come into that conversation as prepared as possible.
Yeah. And you and I are big fans of labeling, just because you can see a behavior, you can call it out. You could be in a meeting and you're really not casting stones. You're just saying, it feels like you and your boss, it seems like this department is kind of struggling in this area, and you need someone to kind of step in and fill that role. Mm-hmm. And they'll just jump right in and like, oh yeah. And they invite you to kind of think more like the things that they're seeing. And, I like the labeling. It feels like, it looks like, it appears. You ask questions that start like that, and it's unassuming, and people are going to give you information, and you're going to be able to kind of build the story of, mm-hmm. This is the organization, and getting promoted, getting a raise, changing maybe my career track. This is what it looks like here. And, with that information, you're much better aligned to collaborate and to move forward.
I like it. And from I guess to switch the mirror around, or to change seats at the table, from you've got a lot more experience being on the employer side of things when someone comes in and wants a raise. How is that different? How does that look from that side of negotiation?
Right now, the most common thing, because hiring is so hard, people are coming in and they're saying, all right, well, I got this offer from this other company and they're offering me X, Y, and Z. And boy, I should probably take this, right? And you're just like, okay, we've got to collaborate here. and
Emergency collaboration.
and for the safe assumption, let's just assume. I mean, I can actually tell a story with this. Pat Stevens, who right now leads our sales team. We hired him. He was brand new to the industry, but really young in a sales career. And we love Pat. I mean, it's just been great having him on the team. And we knew that like Pat's desire to grow inside our company was probably like faster and stronger than what we were actually capable of providing, both in terms of, resources, compensation, title, all of that. Like we just weren't structurally there to give him everything that he needed. And so like we were upfront, but he came to us just because he was so good. He's getting recruited and he's like, I have this offer. Here it is. And he actually had the offer. I'd really like to stay here, but I'd be crazy not to like take a really hard look and probably take this because of, X, Y, and Z. And we could get empathetic with Pat real quick, but we just really weren't there yet. So we had to kind of unlayer the onion, so to speak, and ask questions. Like it feels like, you're really excited about this offer. What do you like? What do you not like? At Nutrislice, what do you like? What do you not like? And Pat like opened up and, he collaborated together and we were able to kind of build the case. And, a lot of people think it's about money. A lot of times, money is a variable for sure. And in this situation, we needed to address that. But in that process, Pat, how are we supposed to like compensate you at this level of what they're saying when we're just not that company? We're not there yet. Right. Like we had to force some empathy. Pat had to see things from our vantage point, and he did. And he actually revealed in the process, like, I don't think I need that much money to be happy here at Nutrislice. There's some other things that matter to me. And we went through the process and we, discovered that one of the things that he really appreciated was knowing the executive team and being able to work closely with them and knowing that we were going to be fighting his cause to grow in his career. His concern with this other offer was it was a bigger company and he wasn't quite sure his boss would know him to the extent that we knew him. And, we like had that conversation and, we really wanted to keep Pat. So we were like, hey, give us a chance to make a counter offer. And one of the things that we did, I mean, not every company can do this, but I think we actually went back to him. We said, Pat, here's the offer. The creative fun part was, Pat loves Chipotle. It's insane how much time he spends at Chipotle. He knows that menu inside and out, up and down, like knows all their marketing. And we're like, Pat, we're going to give you $100 a month because you kind of have to commute into work and, you don't always able to go home. We're going to give you $100 a month in Chipotle gift cards. And that was just like hey, like we know random. You, we understand you, we care about you. And we'd have to ask Pat, like what made him like stay. But I always joke, like, it's because like we did that discovery process. We were able to show empathy on both sides. And then we like the things that mattered to him. We totally went there and we met him, and he ended up staying, growing. He's leading our sales team right now.
And so, I mean, I guess from the employer side of things, it makes sense that Pat would never have come to you if he didn't want to stay in some way. So there's already the opportunity for collaboration there, for negotiation, because he showed that, he didn't just walk out the door with that other offer letter in hand and, throw up the peace sign and say, thanks for the help to get here, kind of a thing. Or, you couldn't do what I needed. I found something new. So he stayed around to talk about it, which I think is step one, meaning if they'll come to the table, there's an opportunity to negotiate, which means there's an opportunity to collaborate. And from the employer side of things, it's important also, I think a lot of times, maybe historically, there's been the yes, no answer of we can do it, we can't do it. Instead, you took the approach of saying, let us help you understand where we are. And more importantly, let us help understand what's most important to you. Because for some people, it is money. For some people, it is quality of life. For some people, it's Chipotle. It really doesn't matter what that thing is. It's getting to the root of that. And this kind of really goes hand in hand when we were talking about clients and operators, where if a client comes in and they demand that they need something right away, most of the time what they're demanding is not necessarily what they need. What they need is to look good in front of their client. What they need is to deliver on a promise they made someone else. And then you can only get to that, whatever that is, whether it's your employee asking for a raise or asking to help them not leave, or a client coming in with something very difficult. It's asking the right questions, doing the discovery that needs to be done, the open-ended too. And I think that's something we've not really talked about is making sure that every question you ask is open. It allows for expansion and in-depth analysis.
On the manager side, if you're a manager, that tactic of an employee coming, hey, I've got this offer, can you beat it? Essentially, that's something that employees do. And maybe that in their kind of introduction to negotiation, there's probably a better way, but it happens more than it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And you just have to know how to deal with that. So, I would say first and foremost, you need to slow things down. The worst is when you're negotiating against time. And one of that tactic is I've already got this in hand. You better act quick because I might be out the door and you've got this project or you've got all these things you're trying to accomplish. And if I leave, you're toast. And, managers just need to take a deep breath and be look, I'm not going to negotiate against time. We're going to sit down and I want to clearly understand. There's some things that the fact that it's gotten this far in our relationship and I'm somewhat surprised that you're coming to me tells me that I probably need to get a little more empathetic and understand where you're at and what you want. But at the same time, you're definitely coming and, you're thinking of number one, which is fine, but I need you to also see where I'm coming from. And so I need to use some of these negotiation tactics to collaborate so that we're on the same page, kind of working towards the same resolution. And, indubitably, in every one of these in every one of these conversations, there's the light bulb moment where I know if we can get to this level of mutual understanding of the situation and that we understand one another, if we both choose to pursue a relationship, a partnership, then it's going to happen. We just have to kind of work out the details, but the fun is kind of creating that win-win scenario, setting up the structure and the framework so that, everyone can move forward happily.
I like that. And so I think that to sum up some of the things that we've talked about today, it's when you look at negotiation, if somebody comes to the table, the metaphorical table of your inbox or a request or whatever it is, no matter what position they start at, the fact that they came and they are willing to talk means there's an opportunity for negotiation. And if there's an opportunity for negotiation, there's an opportunity for collaboration. So going into it with that mindset, I think opens up a lot of doors that start off closed. If you come from maybe the wrong mindset or maybe not the best mindset. And then, adding empathy into the conversation, understanding what's motivating people the most, what things are really driving them, and helping them to understand too your side of the conversation, which is how can I get you what you need, and forcing them to think about that, to add a sense of realism to it, meaning you can't just come in and say I want a giant pink unicorn that can fly around my living room. It's okay, how can I get you that unicorn? How can I make this wonderful thing happen for you? And then I think we also talked about labeling as an important part of helping other people identify what's really important to them or where they're coming from and how they feel about a certain topic. And then maybe the last one that was also just as important as the rest was going into any negotiation with the work done on your end, with it in a personal position. If you're going into your employer and saying, I want a raise, going into that with the idea that I need to know what their position is going to be before I go into it. And I need to know what's most important to them and show that value while I'm in the room. And from maybe the employer side of things, it's taking the time. If somebody comes in and says, I want to leave, it's what's really important to you. Is it this new job, or is it something we can do to meet the needs of what you love about this new offer?
Yeah.
Did I sum it all up?
You got it.
Did I get it?
Negotiation is a life-changing skill. I would, my observation just with the people that we've worked with and people that we've hired internally, I think, step one is just getting a person to the point where they can feel empathy for others. And that takes some work. Some of us are
Mhm.
cut out for it. Some of us aren't. That's only 50% of the equation, though, to good negotiation. I think the opportunity in the future is, and now and into the future is, how do I take my skill set such that I can empathize for the other person, but can I help them empathize for me? And if I don't feel that they're there yet, then it's not going to be a great negotiation. So what are the tools and the techniques, the questions? What are the things that I can do to bring that to the table so that there's mutual empathy, mutual understanding, and then like collaboration is the byproduct of that. And some really creative partnerships are going to happen because, someone's out there listening and like, okay, I'm going to do this.
I love it. And we're coming up against the end of the hour, so I want to make sure that anyone out there that's listening, if you want to hear more about this, I think like we could talk about this for days on end. In that we didn't really go into any of the nuances of anything. We talked a little bit about labeling, but there's mirroring.
Yeah.
There's so many other things we could talk about. So if anybody
we need to
listening to
have,
this,
like we need to set up like I don't know, like a Facebook Live or some type of group discussion where we can just talk about the tips and tricks. I went to some of my team members and I was like, hey, throw out some questions that you would have, to help me kind of prepare for this. But like, what would you want to know if you're listening to this? And I got some great questions that we can't ask you, but maybe the things to consider. One of them is like, hey, I'm living in Texas. We're friendly. We're easygoing. I'm responsible to manage clients in the Northeast. And I don't want to like cast stereotypes, but they're like, I'm always so nervous and anxious every time I get on to work with them just because they're not like Texan friendly. So like, how do you negotiate against different negotiating personalities? Like, how do you do that?
I love that one because it's such a learning curve, understanding that different parts of the United States, state to state, region to region, have such different approaches to conversation and points of view, and understanding that is an important part of negotiating.
Yeah. We're with, this is kind of tipped at my first experience. A lot of times I'm in meetings like cohorts and groups, just kind of professional development groups, and they're older generation, they're boomers, right? And they start talking about millennials. I'm like, hey, be nice. This is my group. But they're like, these millennials, they come in to work and after 3 months, they feel like they can go straight to the CEO's office. And it's like, well, how do you negotiate like the different generations? And there's all sorts of things that are happening there, and it works for sure both ways. Well, it can be a beast. So like, how do you do it? These are like the issues that I think as it relates to negotiation are critical and fun to kind of discuss and figure out. How do we how do I as an individual move forward and negotiate these relationships effectively?
Let's line up a part 2 where we deep dive into things, or whether it's a Facebook Live or maybe at national conference we could do something. I don't know. There's a ton of ideas out there, but I do want to make sure that if people want to hear more, I think we have a lot more to discuss on this topic because this is just tip of the iceberg. But I do want to say thanks for coming out. Mike, this was awesome information that I think people wanted to know. And I know you're busy, so, carving out an hour for anybody nowadays is greatly appreciated. But before we let you off the hook, there's a question we always ask at the end of this. It's if you could reach back through time to that sweet little baby face boy, Mike, when he's first starting out his career, and he doesn't know anything yet. He hasn't figured out the art of negotiation. You're on your professional journey. What's one thing you wish you could tell yourself at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I could go back in time and chat with myself, I would totally just be like, look, you will go further as an individual, as a company, as a team. You will be able to go further in that pursuit if you are trying to create those win-win scenarios and really prioritizing the success of others. If you can build that empathy and be smart enough to navigate and learn how to make other people successful, that will take you further than if you're just focused and working, striving towards your own success. I just had too many experiences where early on in my career, it felt like it was us against the world, and it was us negotiating against the world. And, everything was a battle and everything was war. And, it's just not a fun way to kind of live life. And as we've evolved as an organization and I've matured and grown, it's like, you know what, like what helps me get the furthest in this endeavor is figuring out all those around me and how do I help them unleash their full potential. And if I just focus on that, they'll take me where I would like to go to.
All right. Wow. Yeah. I like it. I don't know what to say. I think you covered it. This was awesome. Once again, really appreciate you jumping on and giving us some of your wisdom and things you've learned along the way. So
fun time.
That's it from us at Served by SHFM, and we look forward to hearing everybody's feedback on this.
Let us have it. Tell us what we got right and wrong.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. Please keep in mind that the views and opinions expressed on today's episode are not necessarily those of SHFM or any of its members.